From a young naval pilot during World War II to the statesman who presided over the Cold War's end, President George H.W. Bush devoted most of his very long life in service to his country. Rita Braver remembers our 41st president.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear. I see history as a book with many pages, and each day we fill a page with acts of hopefulness and meaning.
The pages of George Herbert Walker Bush's life are a testament to his belief in the purpose and potential of the country he loved.
One nation, under God, indivisible.
At 94, he lived longer than any president in American history, spending most of his life in public service.
He understood the importance of trying to put something back into the system at whatever sacrifice that required.
James Baker was one of Bush's closest friends and also served as his Secretary of State. Baker was there during the tensest moments of the Bush administration, including Operation Desert Storm, the 1991 U.S.-led mission that ousted Saddam Hussein's Iraqi forces after their invasion of Kuwait.
The terrible crimes and tortures committed by Saddam's henchmen against the innocent people of Kuwait are an affront to mankind and a challenge to the freedom of all.
Baker says sending U.S. troops to war was not a decision the president made lightly.
He said, you know, nothing is more difficult than sending someone else's son or daughter off to perhaps die in a foreign land.
Bush understood that firsthand. At 19, he became the youngest Navy bomber pilot in World War II. His plane was hit on a mission in the South Pacific.
The plane went surging forward. I felt this jolt. I could see the fire all around, anti-aircraft. And then suddenly my plane was on fire.
He managed to finish his mission, releasing 4 bombs, then bailed out and was rescued by an American sub.
So I'm floating around in this raft, paddling, and then all of a sudden saw this conning tower come up and saw the submarine surface. Guy standing up in the top of it taking a picture. We still have the picture of it.
George H.W. Bush was born into a prominent New England family. His father, Prescott, was a U.S. Senator from Connecticut. His mother, Dorothy, taught him to be humble.
And she said, you will be modest. You don't brag about yourself.
But historian David McCullough says another woman may have been Bush's most important influence, Barbara Pierce Bush.
I think he's the wisest, smartest, most decent, caring person I know. And I think he's the handsomest thing I ever laid my eyes on.
They fell in love while still in high school and married as soon as he returned from the war. They spent 73 years together until her death this past April.
She could see through the mystic, colorful stagecraft of politics and who was on the level and who wasn't.
Bush got his degree from Yale, where he was captain of the baseball team, and after graduation in 1948, moved his growing family to Texas. The Bushes would have 6 children in all, but friends say they never got over the loss of their 3-year-old daughter, Robin, to leukemia in 1953.
They had a profound effect on me and on Barbara. And I think that horrible incident drew us even closer together.
In Texas, Bush founded an oil company, but politics beckoned. Why do you think he was so drawn to public service?
He used to say, my family inculcated in me a strong sense of public service. And I used to say, George, you can't say inculcated. It sounds like It sounds like a medical procedure or something. I say something else. But that was his philosophy.
It does seem like he may have had the best pre-presidential resume of any president in history.
CIA director, congressman, UN ambassador, ambassador to China.
Bush took on the job of CIA chief in the Gerald Ford administration after congressional hearings revealed massive dirty tricks and illegalities, including charges of spying on U.S. citizens. In 1976, in an interview with Mike Wallace, Bush promised to clean things up.
I think there will be safeguards that certainly the agency can enthusiastically support, and I know will meet with the satisfaction, with the support of the American people.
A few years later, Bush hoped his resume would help him win the 1980 Republican presidential nomination.
I think I've had better experience than any of the others. I know I want to be president more than any of the others.
But Bush lost out to Ronald Reagan and took the number 2 spot on the winning ticket against incumbents Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale.
I think that Bush's service for 8 years as vice president was admirable in his loyalty to the president. He never tried to upstage the president, never openly expressed a disappointment or disagreement with the president.
And Reagan really appreciated that.
Bill Plante, who covered the White House on and off for CBS News for more than 35 years, says Bush had one job that's traditional for vice presidents.
He went to all the funerals of foreign leaders. They used to say in his office, "You die, we fly."
George H.W. Bush finally clinched the Republican presidential nomination in 1988.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
He and his running mate, Indiana Senator Dan Quayle, would go on to win the election.
Thank you all.
Against Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis and Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Bush was the first president in 150 years elected directly after serving as vice president.
We live in a peaceful, prosperous time, but we can make it better. For a new breeze is blowing, and a world refreshed by freedom seems reborn.
It was a time of big international changes. At the end of 1989, Bush sent troops to Panama to topple strongman Manuel Noriega.
The day of the dictator is over.
But there was an even more significant foreign development in that same period, the fall of the Berlin Wall. As communism started to lose its hold in Eastern Europe, President Bush was surprisingly laid back in his response.
You don't seem elated, and I'm wondering if you're thinking
I'm
of the
elated, I'm
problem.
just not an emotional kind of guy.
Well, how elated are you?
I'm very pleased.
George H.W. Bush was never the kind of man who would spike the ball in the end zone. He would never do the victory dance.
And James Baker says that low-key diplomatic approach helped engineer a peaceful end to the Cold War as the Soviet Union collapsed.
He said, wait a minute, we still have business to do with these people, and it would be counterproductive to our interests if we stuck it in their eye.
Bush had domestic success as well, with the signing of a law that gave new protections to Americans with disabilities. But he also faced complaints that he was out of touch. Do you think that reputation was deserved, that he sort of felt he was above it all?
No, I don't think he felt he was above it all, but I do believe that he seemed to have manners which in much of the country were seen as aristocratic, if you will.
In 1992, Bush lost his bid for re-election to Bill Clinton in a three-way race with Ross Perot. It may have been, at least in part, the result of Bush breaking a promise he had made 4 years earlier.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Why did he change his mind once he became president?
He said, I did it because it was the right thing to do. He made a bargain with the Democratic leadership that he would raise taxes if they would cut spending. The taxes got raised, but the spending cuts never came.
And so George H.W. Bush bowed out of center stage.
We have fought the good fight and we've kept the faith, and I believe I have upheld the honor of the presidency of the United States.
Bush would go on to see two of his sons, George and Jeb, become governors.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
Then in 2000, George W. Bush became President of the United States, only the second time in history that a father and son would hold the highest office in the land.
I can't tell you that they agreed on everything, but I'll tell you this, he never intruded on 43's decision-making.
The word is that he didn't take to it kindly when his son was criticized as president.
He hated it. It hurt him.
Where are you?
George H.W. Bush will be remembered for joining with fellow former President Bill Clinton to raise millions for victims of national disasters, and for founding the 1,000 Points of Light Foundation to promote volunteer service. He is also a man who went skydiving on his 75th, 80th, 85th, and 90th birthdays.
Why the world would you want to do that? Something in him. And the fact that she would let him do it.
I christened the United States ship George H.W. Bush. May God bless all who sail her.
But perhaps most of all, George Herbert Walker Bush will be remembered for his sense of honor, decency, and fair play.
Really a beautiful man. And of course, I'm affected because he played such a big role in my life. So it's hard for me to talk about it. Some will say, well, he was too soft to be president, he wasn't tough enough, he wasn't this. He was plenty tough, but he was thoughtful and he was kind and he was considerate. He was lovely.